Hey guys, we're going to look at W2 today, writing informative text to examine and convey complex ideas, and we're going to talk about supporting that information and showing a thorough analysis of the text. So, your project question is, how is a soldier's life forever changed by war? So your format is going to vary quite a bit depending on what you do, whether you do a video, podcast, if you write an essay or build something. So I'm not going to go into detail about each one because what you're going to need to do is figure out which format best works for you and then work in these elements into your writing. So in an introduction, well, first let me pull this poem up. We're going to read, we use the same poem in R1, Dulce et decorum est. I'll just refresh your memory. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cut of vial, incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. Alright, so remember that last line, the Latin line, the title of the poem, means that it is sweet and fitting to die for your country. So, just getting into this, if I'm doing an analysis of the poem, with my introduction, you want to start with the hook, grab the reader's attention. Then you get more specific and broadly introduce your topic, and then you end with a clear thesis statement. So my hook says, when soldiers return home from war, they bring with them physical and mental scars that will never fully heal. And then I introduce the topic. Wilfred Owen's World War I poem, Dulce et decorum est, perfectly captures this idea. The speaker of the poem vividly describes the horrors of the war, including the nightmares experienced by the survivors. These soldiers are often hailed as heroes, and rightfully so, but their experiences change their lives forever. And here's my thesis. Owen uses imagery to develop the theme that war leaf soldiers forever changed. So my whole essay would then talk about the imagery and how that's being used to develop the theme. So moving on to body paragraphs, you're going to need a topic sentence to let the reader know what the paragraph is about, then provide support, examples, evidence, and commentary, and end with a concluding sentence. So here's what that looks like. Straight away, I'm going to get a highlighter. Straight away, Owens creates a horrifying picture of World War I. So we know this paragraph is going to be about this horrifying picture of World War I. Oftentimes when people think of war, they think about soldiers being heroic. These soldiers are valorous, but people usually don't consider the circumstances surrounding their acts of bravery. Owen opens the poem by describing the soldiers, by comparing the soldiers to old beggars under sacks, a stark image that immediately makes the reader think of weak, dirty men on their deathbeds. Okay, this, typically when we're citing an article, we've talked about putting the page number. When you're citing a poem, you put the line number. So that tells us that is from line 1. Moving on, he uses similar imagery throughout the poem to force his readers to truly understand the nightmare that is war. As the readers progress through the poem, Owen uses sensory language to put us right there with the soldiers. So in this concluding sentence, I want you to really practice this. As the readers progress through the poem, Owen uses sensory language to put us right there with the soldiers. This is transitioning on to the next paragraph. So my next paragraph would focus on sensory language, and then progress through the poem is kind of my transitional phrase there. But notice how the whole paragraph is just talking about this horrifying picture of World War I. Okay, so make sure you stay on topic. And then when you write your conclusion, first sentence, you're just going to restate your thesis, but don't just use the same words you did in your introduction. Bring in what you've discussed throughout, and then sum it up and leave the reader with something to think about. So it can be a question, a big idea, a quote, or a final thought you have, but don't introduce any new information. So, an example, Owen effectively uses vivid imagery in his poem to show readers the horrors of war and convince them that they should not glorify war to children. Okay, so this first part, these 2 lines, are the restatement of my thesis. I'm bringing in what I talked about in the rest of the essay. You guys, I only gave you one body paragraph, but we have vivid imagery, the horrors of war, and then convincing they should not glorify war to children. Then I sum it up. He uses figurative language to paint a picture. He describes sights, sounds, and smells that place the reader in the war, and he also uses blunt language to persuade his readers. So that part is the summary. Even though this war occurred 100 years ago, the themes and images are still relevant when discussing war today. Because war does forever change everyone involved. Why is the United States always so anxious to go to war? So these last 2 sentences are that I kind of introduce this idea, connect it to modern times, and then leave the reader with that lingering question. Okay? So you're going to practice this. I want you to use American Sniper or one of the poems or short stories. You're going to write a thesis statement. Not the whole introduction, just the thesis statement. And then write 1 body paragraph. So I suggest doing this in a Google Doc so you can use it later on in your project, but make sure you paste it too here in the answer in the Edpuzzle, because it's just a lot easier to grade that way. So let me know if you need help with anything.